Some other things that are coming up. We'll have the break for the summer after next month. The speaker that was for this month, I'm trying to get him for next month. So as of right now, still to be announced. Then we'll have break from June, July, and August. Come back and in September, I'm trying to get the Okmulgee Indigenous Celebration, someone from the Okmulgee, to come and talk to us about the Indians and the time during the Americans here in Georgia along the rivers. In October, I have someone coming to talk about a different perspective of the Battle of Kettle Creek. And then November, I'm trying to get someone to do a speak about how they celebrated Christmas during the Revolution. There.
This weekend in Augusta.
Yes.
Living History Park.
Yes.
Under the crown.
I'll get with you and we'll put an email together and send that out as well. Oh, so that is that. I will now transition to Merryweather Lewis. And I'm going to have to put these back on because I can't see. I am Captain Merryweather Lewis and of the Corps of Engineers, Corps of Discovery. This year marks 220 years. It happened on May 14th, 1804. But before I talk about that, I would like to talk to you about Lewis and his growing up in his childhood. He was born August 18th, 1774, 1 year, 1 day before the Revolution started. I was born in Locust Hill Plantation, Colonial Virginia. I was the son of William Lewis, the Welsh ancestry, and the Lewis Merryweather of an English ancestry. My father died of pneumonia in 1779, and within about a year, my mother remarried a gentleman by the name of John Marks, and he happened to decide to move to no other state but Georgia. I grew up along the Broad River on the Goose Pond community of the Broad River in Wilkinson County, or Wilkes County. Now it's called Oglethorpe County. I'm also the great-great-grandchild of David Crawford, a prominent Virginia burghers and militia colonel. My education, I didn't have any education until I was 13. My uncle decided to move me to Virginia to go through education and military training. But before that, all my education was in the Georgia frontier. I would take my dog and my rifle, and I would go into the woods and procure meals, camp for the day at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. He would camp for 2 or 3 days by himself in Indian territory. And he would scout the rivers, and he would learn different things. Some of his tools he had was a compass. Looks like this. I have this to show. And he also had a eyeglass as well. These come in play later on as well. A lot of times he spent time out in the woods. During the winters, he would help his father chop wood. I know how hard it is to chop wood. And I would chop wood for my family and put it up. Make sure that we had plenty of it to go through it. My mother taught me how to gather wild herbs for medicine purposes, among other things. I had a long life passion of being outside in the wilderness and learning how to defend for myself. At the age of 13, I went back to Virginia for my education by a private tutor, my father's brother, Nicholas Lewis, and he became my guardian. At the age of 7, after 7 years of education, he joined the Virginia militia. In 1794, he was sent to a detachment that was involving to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. In 1795, I joined the United States Army, commissioned as an ensign, and as my rank that was later abolished in the equivalent of today's modern day lieutenant. By the 18th century, 1800, I rose to captain and ended my service there in 1801. Among other commanding officers was William Clark, a friend of mine, who would later become my companion in the Corps of Discoveries. My military aspirations. On April 1st, 1801, I was appointed secretary to the President, Thomas Jefferson, who I knew through Virginia society in the Alma Mater County. I resided in the presidential mansions and frequently conversed with various prominent figures in politics, the arts, and other circles. I compiled information on the personnel and policies of the United States Army, which had seen an influx of the Federalist officers as a result of midnight appointments made by the outgoing President, John Adams. Thomas Jefferson decided after the Louisiana Purchase that he wanted to know how much land was to the west. And knowing me personally, he decided that I would head that expedition. So he's told me to start gathering people in 1802 and 1803. I was able to procure about 40 people. 27 of them were military members. They were very young. They had no families or very little family. So that if they were to go west, they would die. He didn't want them to be missed. So he started to get people together to go west. So after the purchase, Thomas Jefferson wanted to find out how much land. And he asked Congress to fund the expedition. Congress decided to fund it. By 1803, he commissioned the Corps of Discoveries and named me the Army captain. And my partner I chose was William Clark. The goal of the Corps was to discover the Louisiana Purchase and establish the trades with U.S. sovereignty over the native peoples along the Missouri River. Jefferson also wanted to establish the U.S. claim of the Pacific Northwest and Oregon Territory by documenting an American presence before the European nations could lay their hands on it. At the time, we had 13 colonies that had now become the United States. We purchased Louisiana. We purchased Louisiana, and that was basically everything west. But if you didn't show that you were there, it's like going to the moon and putting a flag on it. If you didn't show that you were there, the French or the Spanish could take over, or even English. At the time, even Canada was, and it still is governed by England in somewhat. So they needed to establish how much land are we going to take and make sure is America. So that was what his job was. The U.S. Mint prepared special silver medallions with the portrait of Jefferson and had a message of friendship and peace called the Indian Peace Medals. There were 80 of them made. They were distributed. They were to meet and distribute them to other nations. Here is a replica of that coin. On one side it has President, and on the other says peace and friendship, and it's a handshake with two peace pipes.
Wasn't it featured also on one of the quarters when they were doing the quarters?
It was featured on the back of one of the quarters, and it's actually on our nickels. I believe there's a nickel that had it as well.
What was the real one that size, or was it the big size that sometimes I've seen in pictures?
So, what I have been able to establish, or at least the known archaeology of it, I don't think there's any left. When they were, all 80 of them were given out, right? They were given out to chiefs or Indian prominence, people that were of importance. They would melt down silver, so they most likely melted it down and used it for other things.
Right.
So as far as they can tell, they don't have the original minting of it. It was a pocket-sized coin.
Okay.
I think the other ones may have been plaques that he could put along the way, but they have never been found.
Gotcha.
How far west was the expedition going to go?
The total mileage was 8,000 miles.
Wow.
He would travel 8,000 miles. That would be going and coming back. I looked that up when I was doing all this stuff, and it seems crazy, but it's not like he went from Georgia or Louisiana straight out.
No.
He went up and over and had to backtrack, and so the entire journey of what he had, he did 8,000 miles. Yep, to try to get there.
Now, when you think about how the U.S. is structured today,
Yes.
how far west equivalent did he go? Did he get beyond Missouri?
He went all the way to California.
Oh, all the way to California?
Yeah.
Beside the ocean? Wow.
Yeah, his last fort was in Portland, wasn't it?
It was in Portland. Yep.
Okay, wow.
He would have went all the way to the. He got to see the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, he went all the way. Along the way, they knew that they were going to inquire hostiles, and so they found this new rifle. It's called the Gran Anarda air rifle, and it looks just like a musket, except it has the stock part has it's metal, okay, and it actually has air that you would hold the gun and you take a pump and you pump air into the back of it, and you'd load the ball through the breech and you could cock the hammer and fire. The hammer did nothing. It just released the air from the back to the front. He could shoot 22 bullets within a minute. He could wear it out. And that gun is a replica of that gun is ridiculously hard to find. I looked to find one to see if anybody local or somebody in the United States or in Georgia would have it so I could show it. It's very hard to find. There are a few replicas, but it's hard. He also took enough black powder that he thought he would need for the entire trip. He took flintlock arms, knives. He took blacksmith supplies, cartography equipment. They also carried flags, gift bundles, medicine, and other items that would be needed on their journey. Much time went into ensuring a sufficient supply of these items. They actually built one of the barges there so that they could use that boat. When they ran out of room to use the boat, it was dismantled and used for other things. I think he built a fort with it at some point. To create the Corps of Discovery, and I got a nephew who's getting ready to go into engineering, and we talked about Corps of Engineers the other day, and so I keep saying Corps of Engineers.
Okay, Joe, we understand.
So to create the Corps of Discovery, and to ensure any chance of success, I wanted to find the best possible men that I could, and get them to join my expedition. Everyone was treated the same. There was a total of 33 volunteers and 29 in training. The 29 were the actual military people. They spent the 1803 and 1804 winter at Camp Dulas in the Indian Territory. And on May 14th, coming up next month, 1804, the Corps of Discovery left by canoe in order to meet up with Lewis at the St. Charles, Missouri. The expedition set off west, following the Missouri River on May 21st. 3 days later, they passed the French settlement of La Charette, the most western Euro-American settlement on the Missouri. One of the men was named York. He lists a lot of their names, but York is one of the most important that he listed. He was a slave. He was owned by Clark. Once they left the U.S. law, he was treated as a free man, and he also had a vote. So during that time, slavery was still a thing that happened. And as historically, we have to recognize it. It may not be the best of things, but we recognize it. But when he left on the boat and went upriver, he became a free man, and he was treated as such. He was given as everyone. If they came to a decision, everyone would have a fair share. And they would be able to say, let's go left or let's go right. And one other person along that trip had a significant role. Her name was Sacagawea. And she also was treated as a person that had a vote in what we would do. So during that time, those two ladies were not introduced until 1900, 1920s, able to vote. And so, and same with African Americans. They were in 1865 they were emancipated, but they didn't get it for another 100 years. They weren't able to, if I'm saying that right, men were not able to vote until.
They could vote if someone would let them.
So there was still kind of hazy until the 60s, I'm guessing. So they set off. The expedition followed the Missouri River through what is now known Kansas City, Missouri, the Omaha, Nebraska. And on August 20th, 1804, Sergeant Charles Floyd died, most likely of an appendix. He is the only death in the entire expedition. Now,
was most of the travel by wagon?
No, it was actually by boat. And then when they got to the Rockies, they had to pull the boats over and go down little streams, and they'd pull the boats up. They would portage throughout all these mountains ranges until they came to another place, and they'd put in water, and they'd go and then realize that this is a lake, not a river, until they found things that they kept heading west. That was it.
That's incredible.
It's incredible. There's not a movie of it, but there are some History Channel documentaries that are on YouTube that are very easy, about 45 minutes to watch, and they talk about those portages and how I've carried just a kayak over a portage a mile. And they're pushing these up mountains. Yes, and no horses. They had one dog. His name was Seaman. So during the coming weeks, they would reach the Great Plains. They would be among a select group of white people to see the area abound with elk, deer, bison, and beaver before the large-scale encroachment of the European settlers. He found 122 different species, and in his journal, he documented them by drawing them. This book has some of the drawings, and you're more than welcome to look at the book. He documented species. He took down the names that the natives called them, or Sacagawea, and he would then draw the species. A guy that didn't get schooling until he was 13, and he could draw as well as he could write as well as he could, and he kept a journal of every single day. It is phenomenal. Terry posted the other day, one of the days in our group, and I was like, shh, don't talk about that. I'm talking about that. But every single day he journaled. That comes into place. Over the next 2 years, the Lewis and Clark expedition established relations with more than 24 indigenous nations between Missouri and the Pacific Ocean. Researchers now acknowledge that without such contact or help, the Corps of Engineers would be undoubtedly starved to death before they had ever made it to the Rockies. The amount of people and the indigenous people that they made, the amount of food that he took, still would have never took care of them for the year and some odd time that it took for them for the 2 years that it took for them to go. I think it was 21 months or something like that. The total time in preparation for it. If they would not have made friends, they would not have been able to make it. That comes into play without Sacagawea, because they had an Indian. Number one, she was the only Indian on the thing. Because they had an Indian and she was a woman, the natives said, because they had a woman traveling with them, and that time she was either pregnant or after she had birth, she had a baby, they said these people cannot be a warring party. So they did not bother them. They did not molest them. So they were able to, because of her, and she knew different languages of Indians. She was married to Charbon. There's a whole set of figures back here of Merryweather Lewis, Clark and Sacagawea, York, and then Charbon, the Frenchman. He was a fur trader, and he most likely came from Canada when he had met her. She was captured, and he met her. He married her, and then they had a baby together. Without her, they would have never made it. Without other Indians being able to be friendly to them, they would have been killed or sometime when they went over the Rockies.
He originally hired him as the translator, but he didn't know the languages.
He didn't.
She did.
She was. That's exactly right. During the expedition, they were in some really rough rapids, and she was holding onto the baby, and his journal falls overboard. And with her baby being held close to her, she leans over and moves the boat to it, grabs his journal, and saves it. Lewis doesn't know this at the time, but after they finally, they go through the rapids, it's done. He's like, I lost my journal, and she says, no, I have it. I was able to save it. I knew it was important.
Wonderful.
So, when they couldn't take the boats any longer or any further, they would leave them to hope to be able to come back to them and get them in return. So there were times that they did not use the boats and go over the Rockies, and they had left them in certain places to be able to use them as they returned. That's not saying that the Indians didn't take them or what have you, but that was their ideas. There was a dog. He was a Newfoundland dog. He was bought by Clark and given to Merryweather. A Newfoundland stands about that tall. Okay, there's a model of him back here as well. There was a couple times when they would meet Indians, they were at awe of a black man. First of all, they were just in amazement. He was huge. That's what he was probably 6'5", 6'4", something like that. He was just a big man. He was bulky. He was huge. And when they would see them, the Indians wanted to have their genes, so they would ask him to have relations with the Indians there. There's a study right now trying to find out how many people are still descendants of Lewis and Clark's expedition that have native blood. So there are people that think that they have native blood from the expedition, so they're trying to find out if Lewis or Clark or York possibly has blood in the Native American Indians. The dog people were so fascinated with this dog because it could save people from drowning. That's what it was intended for. It was a life-saving dog. And matter of fact, during the expedition, he saved 2 people from drowning. Now remember, only one person died of acute appendicitis. And now this dog has now saved 2 or 3 other people from drowning. Other people had been saved through his journals. You can tell that there was other people saved different methods. One time, 2 to 3 Indians came at night and took Seaman away. They let him off. And Merryweather was so angry that he went to the chief and said, if he's not returned, I'm going to take care of it. And so he was able to get a few other Indians and a few of his men together and go and hunt these people down. And as soon as they saw the expedition, those 10 to 15 men coming to get the dog, they released the dog. It ran right back to Lewis. It was about 24 hours before he got the dog back from the stealing it and taking it. They went and they traveled by boats as often as they could, but there were sometimes they couldn't. On one occasion, John Baptiste was the baby that Sacagawea had. And when they came back, his parents departed to go to the Mandan villages in 1809 and left John Baptiste with Clark. In November of 1809, his parents returned to try farming, but left again in 1811. Clark then has full custody of him and pays for his education. He goes on to be king. He goes on to be a friend of the French king. He goes over to Europe. He becomes friends with a lot of those people over there. And then he comes back to the United States and sets up a store. He comes back and lives with Clark at his storehouse and tries to become more of a member of society, as in giving back to the society, trying to live like his parents would have lived. His parents tried to go and live with the Indians, become the trader or the trade during the trade, the fur trades, and then they tried to do farming, and they just never could settle down. I think it was just two different worlds, and then the world was expanding so fast and rapidly, trying to decide what to do and how to do it. They decided that the best thing for him would be to live there. This is I showed y'all, this is a tool that he would have used. If you know anything, a lot of our presidents were land, what is it called? Surveyors. And so to survey, you would need one of these, and you would need a sextant, a compass. And he surveyed, he wrote pictures, he wrote a diary, all this, and he had only started learning to do this at the age of 13. It's just amazing how much he was able to do. This is a functioning one, so you can look at this and this. Does anybody have any questions about the expedition?
At that time, how much was invested in the expedition?
Money wise?
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere about $4 million at the time.
Which is a lot of money at the time.
I believe that's what I read. Could you imagine? I'm trying to imagine canoes, because they start off with canoes and they built the boat, but hundreds of barrels of food. You know, a 55-gallon drum, a wooden drum, even the small ones. You have to have rice. They would have corn, potatoes. They would have killed their meats. So they wouldn't have they may have taken dried stuff, but they would have killed most of their meat on their way. Seeing buffalo. So there was two different types of buffalo in the United States. One was a wooded buffalo, and one was a plains buffalo. The wooded buffalo is gone.
Yeah.
We had buffalo here in Georgia that was called the woodland buffalo. They're all gone. So yeah, it was. Could only imagine, and I think that was to pay for the military men. That was for everything. That was the entire expedition to get them to the starting port and get them going and everything. I think that's what I read.
Can you tell anything about when she met her brother?
I did. So, no, I can't.
Okay.
Please do that.
Well,
so, eventually they came to the place where Sacagawea had family, and she knew the area, and she knew this was her family, and so I don't know the whole story because I did more of the expedition in Lewis and Clark, which I never knew. Merryweather Lewis grew up in Georgia for 9 years. Never knew it. Terry's going to tell us about when she realizes that this is her brother that they just bumped into.
Well, I think that everybody can agree that this is a neglected part of our history. I mean, how many knew any of this before today?
A little bit, right?
What do you know about it?
What was the name of the guy who died?
His name was Sergeant Floyd.
He's my cousin.
He's your cousin.
Amazing.
Well, see that's, and so that makes sense. You're from Georgia. A lot of people would have been from Georgia, Tennessee, this area, or even Virginia, because his connections.
John James Floyd, who was who actually did some things with Daniel Boone,
Yeah.
and from Kentucky, and He's not, it wasn't his first wife. His first wife is my grandmother, but it's like his second or third wife.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, whoa is right. Whoa, whoa.
So, yeah, I read up about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess what I was meaning is that for the majority of people, we don't have cousins that are part of the expedition, and the schools don't talk about it.
The schools do not talk
They
about
talk about the Louisiana Purchase, and then they say that Lewis and Clark, but that's it. They don't tell us the details.
Yep.
And so, I collect GI Joes, and I also like history figures as well. And so I ran across one day these two figures of Lewis and Clark, and I had to have them. But the company that made them didn't, they were gone out of business. So I had to do searching. And I think when Joe got his, you had to do some searching to even find yours, didn't
Yes.
you?
Very expensive too.
Yeah, very expensive. Anyway, that sparked my interest in trying to learn about this Corps of Discovery and how much of a blessing it was to make our country a better country. The fact that the black man and the woman had the right to vote, that's an exceptional thing that at that time period it's unheard of. So I had to have those figures. And in the process I learned that Sacagawea, we know very little about her. I guess probably one of the things that sparked my interest in her is when they made the coin. You remember they made the coin?
Yeah, dollar coin.
Yeah. And that got me really interested in wanting to know more about her. Well, I don't know everything about her, but the little tidbit that I remember is that they're going along a river and they can see natives on the other side of the river. And they don't know if these natives mean them good or mean them bad. They just don't really know. And so they continue to follow them. And as they get to a place where the river is closer, the banks are closer,
Yep.
She sees her brother. And she, goes into the water to go and meet him. And he sees her and jumps off his horse. And they meet basically and have like a week or so of rivalry and partying because, this is her. She was captured when she was young, and he hasn't seen her in a long time. And so it was like a reunion of the family. And I didn't do enough study, so I can't answer this. He said there were no horses, but I do recall that she got a few horses from her brother. I'm not really sure what.
Let me rephrase that. They didn't take horses to begin with. They came in contact with Indians that gave them pack mules and things like that.
Okay,
So they weren't able to go over the Rockies with horses.
That's it.
They didn't take them. They bartered for them.
Yeah.
They had, does anybody know who, what's the British company that does the trades?
You're talking about the Hudson.
The Hudson Bay.
Yeah, that's the oldest company in America.
It's the Hudson Bay Company. They had the red wool with the black stripes blankets.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to make sure that, and they had like gift wrap. So they had all kinds of stuff in it and wrapped it up. They would have silver in it. They would have tomahawk heads, tomahawk staffs, spear heads, anything that they knew that the Indians would want and trade.
Right.
They wanted all the 22 guns that he had brought, but they would not trade none of them.
No, but
There was one time that they were being approached fast and rapidly. Now the gun doesn't sound like a flintlock, right? Because it doesn't have powder to blow up, but it does have a sound. And he just got one of the guns and started shooting just to scare them off, because he could fire the gun so many times so fast. So he just scared them off.
That's right.
Now, what tribe was she part of?
She was Mandan.
Yeah, she was Mandan. Yep, she was Mandan, and she was, for some reason, taken from way out there and then brought back to slavery and here. There had to be some type of significance. There was something that they did it for. She may have been a princess, which a lot of people have said that she may have been. That means that she was the chief's daughter.
She spoke at least 5 languages.
She knew,
Which is
Yep.
completely amazing.
I think she knew French, English, and then all the different languages, the 3 or 4, 5 languages that she knew that were Indian languages as well.
You know, it's sad that most of us know nothing about her other than the dollar coin.
I tried to get some dollar coins today,
It is.
and
I would have brought
none of
one. I would
none
have
of the
brought
banks had any. I should have asked.
one. I would have brought one. I'm not.
I'll read you
I've got 5 left that I've kept.
I'll read an excerpt from his book. This is the Journals of Lewis and Clark, April 17th, 1805, Wednesday. Lewis says, a delightful morning. Set out on an early hour. The country through which we passed today was much the same as that described of yesterday. There was more appearance of burnt hills, furnishing large quantities of lava and pumice stones. On the latter, some pieces were seen floating down the river. Captain Clark walked on the shore this morning on the starboard side, and did not join us until half after 6 in the evening. He informed me that he had seen the remains of the Asbinola encampment in every point of the woodland through which we had passed. We saw the immense quantities of game in every direction around us. We passed up the river, consisting of herds of buffalo, elk, and antelope, with some deer and wolves. Though we continue to see many tracks of bear, we have not seen but very few of them, and those are a great distance and generally running from us. I therefore presume that they are extremely weary and shy. The Indians' count of them does not correspond with our experience so far. The black bear passed near the Progress on the 16th, which was the day before, and was seen by myself and the party, but he so quickly disappeared that we did not even get to shoot at him. At the place that we halted to dine on the larboard side, we met with a herd of buffalo, of which I killed the fattest as I conceived among them. However, on examining, I found it to be poor, that I thought it unfit for us only to took the tongue. So it was in such bad shape that he could only take the tongue. The party killed another, which was more lean, just before the encampment that evening, and we saw some tracks of Indians who had passed about 24 hours before. They left our rafts of timber on the starboard side, on which they had passed. We supposed them to have been a party of the Asbones, who had been in the war against the Rocky Mountain Indians, and then on their return home. Captain Clark saw a curfew today. There were 3 beaver taken this morning by the party. The men preferred the flesh of this animal of any other which we have had, or are able to procure at this moment. I eat very healthily of the beaver myself, and I think it is excellent, particularly the tail and the liver. We had a fair wind today, which enabled us to sail the great party of the distance we traveled, and camped on the larboard side shore, the extremity of the last course. And there, the book's amazing. I got it for $7 at Barnes and Noble, Barnes and Nobles. There was a time that they came to a river, and it split. And Merryweather Lewis said, "We're going to take the left side." And some of the men said, "No, it looks like the right side's the better side." He said, "Let's put it to the vote." That's why we decided to do this. So they sent some scouts ahead, and they still couldn't decide. So they decided, we're going to vote. And they voted. And because the men knew Lewis's decision, a lot of the people decided to vote for Lewis's side. They went for 3 days, and he was starting to doubt himself. And then he finally found the river opened back up, and it was the right way. And so There were times that they had to make those decisions, and that was one of his recorded times. And they took that and they went, and it happened to be the right place. They would send out scouts, but they'd have to send out enough men to take care of Indians. They probably knew about how many Indians there were in scoutings of the Indians, so they would have to send out at least that many, and their good guns to make sure that they could procure what they needed. And they kept close to the shores, and in the Rockies, they kept close to each other. So, any more questions?
I was reading about the rifle,
Yes.
and it seems that it was developed about 1780,
That's correct.
somewhere along in there, and there was
That's-
also an air pistol.
Yep. Yep.
And you can Google it.
It is
fascinating.
It is.
I've never heard of this before. This is
So,
great.
if you were to go buy a really nice gun right now, a real gun, you're looking at least $1,000, right? $1,000 for a pretty good gun and scope. Right now in Britain, you cannot buy a firearm. Okay, you just can't. But the number one gun they sell is an air gun. It's just a modern air gun.
Right.
And so you can shoot anything with that air gun. They don't consider that a rifle,
gun.
right? They don't consider it a gun. You can shoot different. Well, no, you can shoot different animals depending on what size projectiles you use. But that's what they use. They use an air gun.
Right.
This one was a 46 caliber.
Yes, it was a 46 caliber. I think I had that. Yeah, 46 caliber. I think it could shoot up to 22 times a minute. Just amazing. There's a couple of YouTube videos that show the gun and demonstrate it for you, and it's really
Do
cool.
you have the story of when he showed it to the number chiefs?
No, tell it.
I don't remember it.
So every time, so I do know this. Anytime that he showed the gun he showed them to do that. He only showed them for one reason.
That's right. Scare him.
He wanted to scare them.
That's right.
Don't mess with us when we camp. We have enough people, and I think he only had 2 of the guns.
Yeah.
But he didn't tell them that.
No.
All the other guns, they look the same. They don't look different. So if you've never seen the gun, you just think all of them can shoot 22. Okay. So they had flintlocks, and they had 2 of those guns. And the chiefs, all of them, we want it. I want it. I want it. Trade it for me. I'll give you all these women for it. You know? I'll give you all these horses for it. I want the gun. And they just couldn't. And they couldn't take on any more people anyways.
No.
It shoot a ball.
It shot a ball. Yeah. Yep. And I wish I would have brought my ball maker, but you basically just take a bowl, melt down lead, pour it into the ball maker, and they could make their balls there. So they took lead and just formed balls when they needed them.
Yeah.
Yep. But it had an ability to shoot, I think it was 22 rounds a minute. And it was, like you said, 1780 was this air gun invented that could shoot rapidly.
What was the name of that gun again?
Let me, I'm going to spell it for you because it is.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, let's see. It is a GIRANDONI air rifle.
And the money spent probably even more than what you said.
Yeah.
Because $2,500 is all that Congress approved for him.
Right.
But Jefferson gave him a letter of credit.
They told him whatever you need.
Use, and they estimate that he spent anywhere between $40,000 and $50,000 more than what Congress did. So it comes out between
today's money.
In today's money, anywhere between $28 and $40 million.
Yeah. And again, I should have probably said that. In today's money I said 20 million.
You did fine, Joe.
Yeah.
You did fine.
Oh, it is amazing. And so this is a tricorn hat. Well, we would have called it that. They didn't call them tricorns back then. But this is remember the War of 1812 and Napoleon? They started wearing this hat like this, okay? Napoleon wore his like this, if I'm correct. Well, Clark, the one that's back here, you'll see he wore it to the side. This was worn for practicality, most likely, on a ship. You can see this better without having to bring it underneath the brim. So if you were bringing it up to look, you could see it better. It may have been they wore it to keep the sun out their face this way, okay, and then they moved it when it was behind them, so it blocked more from behind. I can't see except that fashion of the design was just changed throughout the years.
Sure.
From 1700, they had tricorns all the way up to 1812, the War of 1812. They didn't have beards, so when he got back, he was scruffy. All their clothes were completely done. They had leather on because the Indians had showed them how to make clothes out of the hides of animals. So they spent a lot of time having to make stuff. A pair of leather shoes lasts you 2 weeks. So a pair of moccasins would last you 2 weeks. You'd have to then kill more animals, flesh them out, make new moccasins every 2 weeks.
Going back to the rifle for a second.
Yeah.
I wonder if the M1 Garand was named after that.
It probably is the same manufacturer, or it is.
Springfield, I think.
So Springfield was the manufacturer. Maybe it was the same. The name of the person that made it was the Grand's name, which was also made by the same man. It's very interesting.
The Garand was invented in prison.
Yes, I wonder. Like he said, I wonder because it is very close to Grand.
Yeah.
Well,
we can do a research on where the name came from. That's another. Thank you.
Any more questions? This also will tie into my speak next year on Hernando de Soto and how the Indians thought of white people. And we'll talk about that next time. That's it. Thank y'all.